After Dark, where a bunch of us get together and chill out and chat about 3 things we did right, 3 things we did wrong, and at some point I'm going to draw shit. So, boys, how did it go today?
I don't think I hit anything. I don't think I rolled a single time, for anything. So that I think it might be a first for me. Yeah, I don't think I took a swing at a single thing the entire session. So
I would say that the audience was more entertaining than the show.
It started off really slow, but it picked up right, and then it's like, okay, we got to run. We're out of time.
Yeah,
they were
like the show got interesting in the last as well. Texting me, he's like, "This got
10
interesting in the last 10 minutes."
Yep.
Yeah.
No,
it's
the hard. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The hard part is we get to those rooms and he's like, you guys are wasting all this time here. But if we don't do that, he's like, well, you're wasting all this chance to get good loot. And, the minute we don't check, some, Cthulhu in the space armor is going to pop out of the room. Right? So, like,
right.
It's he sort of set up the system where we have to be cautious.
And then we get 5 rooms in a row that had nothing in it. It's like, okay.
Yeah, and I've had this conversation with James because, like, just to modify the show so that it is enjoyable for people. And I've said, like, you can't have ungettable room after ungettable room. No one's interested in that. And he's flushed that and several other notes that I've given him. And I'm kind of at my wit's end.
Well, he kind of listened to you. I mean, there wasn't anything insurpassable about the empty rooms. But that's not particularly exciting either. So he flipped it too far.
I actually thought about tossing a torch into the room with all of the the genie bottles just to watch it burn.
Yeah, that would have been actually kind of cool.
We missed an opportunity to take those hands that were cut off and toss them into the room with the trash compactor.
Yeah, we should have done that.
I thought about that as we were closing. I'm like, dang it.
Yeah. That and I another note that I gave James was like, people want to see monsters out of the various monster manuals, encyclopedia, and stuff like that. And so far, he's like not listened to that note. And it's always like, it's a golem, but it's a super golem. It's this monster, but you can't do anything to it.
Right.
And I'm just like, to me, it's getting a little frustrating. And if people in the chat kind of want to weigh in or talk about, like, are you happy with this show? Because I noticed there's a lot of slamming James and how he runs in the chat. And is that an interesting show to you, or would you rather see?
What would they like to see different?
Yeah, what would you? Would you rather see like a campaign? Would you rather see like actual monsters out of the DM's guide? Would you rather see like the players actually be able to use their quote unquote superpowers, weapons, skills, those kinds of things? What we're getting right now is literally it's becoming every monster is 20 questions. Okay, well, I do this. Well, you can't do that. Well, okay, we do this. Okay, well, that doesn't work either. I mean, that was every monster today. Yeah. And then, okay, finally you get around to killing the monster. And then you get to the treasure, and the treasure is going to be 20 questions.
Like that, like Mega Demon or whatever the hell that thing was that we never really figured out what it was. But it's like some 6-legged thing that was probably 100 feet tall, but it was coming through what I thought was like a 6-foot pentagram. So how does that any of that work? And what kind of if I look at the deities and demigods or the monster manual or whatever, I look at Asmodeus or some of the badasses. None of them fit that description that he was giving us. So it's just like,
no, and that was sort of Andrew's frustration because Andrew knows the rules backwards and forwards, and he keeps trying to do things. And James it's becoming frustrating where you do something and then you explain the rule to him, and he's like, and you don't know why it doesn't work. I mean, you can't play a game full of rules that don't work.
We have a comment from Shadow Illustrator. She said it's all fun for her, but sometimes she would like to see elements she can actually recognize.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I think the ratio's flipped. I mean, I think it's always cool to have stuff that like whoa, I wasn't expecting that, or that's a twist, that I wasn't looking, or anticipating. But I think everything is that, and very few is the recognizable. So we probably need to go 25%, 75%, and flip it back to 75% recognizable, 25%. What the hell? Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I think Shadow the Illustrator, that is absolutely a perfectly spot on comment. And that's someone else made another spot on comment last week where they said, like, it's watching Tolkien being read by a DnD clerk. And I don't know why. And again, like, I'm really telling you, I have sat down, I've had telephone conversations with James and tried to say, like, this is a show, these are the elements, and he starts off every show by saying, because you wanted a campaign, I'm doing a campaign, and we're continuing that today with the Giants. I'm like, and like, where's the campaign? Like, I don't know. I'm getting a little frustrated, and I'm seriously considering retooling the show because it's not working on this level.
All right, we got a giant demon, I guess, but yeah.
Well, did we? I mean,
maybe we saw some
all we
arms.
did was, we chopped off a thing with a vorpal sword.
Yeah.
Andrew basically had to rules lawyer to get happen because James wouldn't let the holy vorpal sword basically turn the. That's a big thing. Like, whatever you can do that makes you a stud, James won't let you do it.
And that was bizarre to me. Yeah, the whole at the very end, everything turns to bread. Okay, no, it didn't. Yeah, it's like what?
Well, it did, but basically we've got genius Andrew who undid it for us.
Yeah, exactly. Dad came to the rescue.
And that's my thing. Like, why are you obsessed with, turning everything into something else? Because that doesn't let people kind of take ownership of their character.
Well,
I mean, look at Jay. Let's just walk through JR's character. How many religions have you had? How many, how many different classes have you been? All, like, your character has been zapped into so many things. It's not funny.
I've been a cavalier from most of it, 4 different religions, and I haven't changed the cavalier. And mostly it's because the religion part, he sort of just wants to assign it. And I don't know, that's just not as cool. I just was never really that into Egyptian whatever. I get why he's picking religions that aren't going to get him sued, but I mean, I've always thought the Norse were cooler. So when that was an option, I'm like, sweet. And he's like, well, you can't change because Anubis is going to kill you. And I'm like, wrong plane, buddy. So and then it was like, when because of the marriage thing, like, I said it as a joke because I froze and I didn't know what to ask for, but once he approved it, I'm like, well, it makes sense for the character.
So are you a Nazgul now, or who turned into a Nazgul? Oh, that was Walt, I think. Yeah, Walt's the Nazgul. I'm like, oh, okay.
No, he's the lord of something evil.
Yeah.
And the Nazguls work for him. Nazgul, not
Nazgul. I like how Walt immediately embraced it, though. He pivoted into it and was like, yes, this is my jam.
You get the little sand buckets, right, that we used to build sandcastles with, right?
Right.
So we jump in with our GI Joes and our Dungeons and Dragons toys and all this other stuff. We build these great castles and stuff like that, and all of a sudden, somebody jumps in the sandbox with us and starts kicking down the sandcastles instead of playing with the toys. And it's like, and then when they get up, it's like, oh wow, wasn't that fun? It's like
he does seem to say that. Now that I beat you about the head and wrecked your castle, wasn't that fun? It's like,
but the other side of it was, okay, so you want to play this as evil? No problem. So I've been kind of digging into the lore because I really enjoy Jay Scott, Lord Gusumba's channel, just because he's been playing in Greyhawk for 40 years. Right, he's a 53-year-old dude, right, and he has such a passion for Greyhawk. and bringing it alive for his game table that I really admire, because you don't really see a passion for something like that last for so long. And the one of the things he was talking about was, and at first I just thought James was mispronouncing my name. But it turns out that there is a very well-known warrior in Greyhawk named Robilar. So when you look him up, right, he's well respected. He became a conqueror of several nations. He was like one of those dudes who, like, he kind of reminds me of like Darth Vader if Darth Vader wasn't a douche. Like imagine a Darth Vader that cared about his men. That, like, you can't take my stormtroopers from me because the 501st are my men, and if you hurt them, it's like you're hurting me, and I will avenge them if you do anything to them. And that's what, when you read the description of Robilar, who eventually becomes like an 18th or 19th level fighter before he dies. You read all these, like he's got these accounts of whoever the guy who originally created him played him up to 18th level, and raised and built nations and all this crazy stuff, and his followers were extremely loyal. His teammates were like on the adventuring party were extremely loyal, and then you look in the stats, he's freaking neutral evil. He was a neutral evil dude, and the second he said, okay, you put this on and you get 2 wraiths, I'm like, oh, I'm evil. What flavor am I evil am I am? Can I be neutral so I have chaotic and lawful elements? Oh, cool. This is even better, because guess what? I'm going to play this shit sideways, and I have no problem embracing a character change like that, as long as you give me room to explore it. If you put me in a box and say, isn't this amazing? And I turn around and now I notice the bars. It's still a freaking cage if it's a cage. It doesn't matter how much good stuff you put in it. But if you were to let me explore being neutral evil and having to work with Terry's character, and you made the great joke, Nick. Oh, look, he's reaching across the aisle. This is what true cooperation can look like. And of course now I'm feeding into it, and I'm like, oh yeah, let's do this.
I think stuff like that can be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The one thing I have a concern about, and it's unclear it's unclear what your powers are. Like, are you a mini Sauron or what are you? I mean,
I don't
know. But if you are, that it's the same concern that I had with Nick becoming a storm giant, which I think is actually working out okay. But there is a game dynamics imbalance that's kind of weird, and it's going to get weirder if you are a mini Sauron. It's cool, but I'm like, the game. How do I'm just thinking from a game logistics point of view. How do you have a storm giant and a mini Sauron with
a guy who
with
punches
a couple
people?
With a couple of level 9 dweebs.
So let me offer this real quick. The first thing that's going to happen, Walt, is James is now going to try to put your character into a box.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it's the only way he can comprehend it. And so he did that with Prometheus with Fever, and then
did it again with the Storm Giant.
The Storm Giant. Yeah. So he'll try to get out in front of it, and he actually called me in the middle of the week when I first got it, and he was like, "You really don't want to be a Storm Giant. You should just the White Wizard will give you some treasure, and he wants you to make him the Storm Giant." He did not, because he knew he'd gone too far. That's one of the problems here, with the balancing issue that you were talking about, Rothman. James, because he likes that because this is the guy who created Gamma World. So Gamma World is all about transformations and turning into stuff and blah, blah, blah. And that's how James likes to play D&D. He just wants to turn you into stuff and give you a bad time, because he's a tournament DM. He is not a campaign DM. He does not know that there's an art, that the player is telling their story through the arc. What James wants to do is just turn you into shit and laugh about it. because that's what a tournament DM does. You pay your $50 at a tournament, you sit down, he abuses you for 3 hours, and he never has to see you again. That's how, I'm not kidding, that's how this guy has spent the last 25 years of his life. I think he wants to be a campaign DM, but it's like he's only ever driven automatic, and he doesn't know how to drive manual.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's the thing there, but you can still have fun with it. You just have to reframe your mind to this. This might be the really fun aspect of it, which is this might be more modern D&D than James is anticipating, because basically what he's turning us into are superheroes with origin stories.
Yeah. No,
So
agreed.
let me ask you this. I think some of it is he's trying to give you what he played with at Gary's table. So maybe instead of saying Gygaxian dungeon, just say old school and stick with that.
I've tried to have that conversation. Everything, like, the problem with James is, like, it's very hard to, in Rothman terms, it's very hard to overwrite the source code of the initial instructions.
Yeah.
Like, I would have to wipe his hard drive clean, recode the entire thing that I told him, in that old source code would still. But you said, I'm like, okay, so, like, I've had all these conversations. Andrew has had, like, the thing of it is like, you have to appreciate his strengths, which he has strengths. And I'm still like, if we do decide to go forward with him, I'm still going to have a conversation with him and say, like, listen, just like, I'm going to reiterate Shadow's comment, and I'm going to say, listen, you got to put something recognizable in here. You're just going way too nuts with, and some of it is just comically ridiculous. Like, the loaf of bread, and here's the ape that's making fun of you and stuff like that. And I think modern people, they kind of do want to see. I'm pretty sure the Greyhawk channel you're mentioning, well, it doesn't have this level of kind of clownishness, right?
No, and what you see a lot of the times is they have like they have their own series of adventures, and then they play through published modules as well.
Yeah.
And the published modules that they're playing are pretty recognizable. So you're not really getting a lot of this. So it's kind of hard because especially, and once again, we've talked about this before, but it's tough when you got baby talk as the naming convention.
Yeah, I was like, the name of the person, why won't you just say it? Like, was he doing that because he didn't want to get sued? I'm like, you're overemphasizing how much Wizards of the Coast, like, it doesn't matter that much. It's just becoming this game show of a dungeon. But here's the thing that really, like, I've been a little hard, but here's the thing that attracts me about this is you're literally getting to do a little bit of archaeology here.
Mm-hmm.
And dive through the source code of D&D, which is this dungeon, as James remembers it from Gary Gygax. Yeah, I'm sure it was ridiculous then. But according to Andrew, it's tracking. It's just I wonder if Gary did this much modification to monsters. I have no doubt that the traps and the curses were there and all that kind of stuff. But I wonder about that too. Is that just after 40 years, was that the experience that was left on James's mind, and that's the only thing he can reproduce?
I mean, to me, I think inevitably you have to have, and it's kind of like the commenter had said. I think you have to have something where, okay, straight out of the monster manual, you recognize it, you know how to deal with that, but there's a twist. But it's recognizable still. You're not suddenly trying to solve a Rubik's cube when you're up against a kobold or something. It's not.
It's not a Medusa.
Thing.
It's a super Medusa. It's not a beholder. It's an elder beholder.
Right.
It's not a demon. It's a super demon. It's not a golem. It's a golem.
Yeah.
Like every monster that we've had, and I understand why he's doing it, because he thinks it keeps it interesting. But what it becomes all of us trying to do something and him saying, that doesn't work. That doesn't work.
Right.
And I know it's personally frustrating for us, but it just makes the characters and the experience look ridiculous.
Right. I mean, to me, because if he's trying to make it harder, just higher hit dice type monsters versus something that is kind of run of the mill, but is like the super version of it. Like
Well, I mean,
that we don't know.
You don't even have to do that. There are things in the monster manual that can, if you just want to kick our ass,
Yeah.
there's things in all of the monster manuals that can kick our ass. Let's fight a Zorn.
Sure.
Let's fight a Mind Flayer.
Yeah.
Let's fight a regular Beholder. That is enough of a challenge and everything like that. But I don't know what James's problem is. He identifies too much with the monsters. He really wants them to be unbeatable. Then he wants to wipe the floor with you, and then he gets some kind of satisfaction out of that. Like, it makes him feel like he's a better player. I don't know. He has a hard time just giving you an orc to wail on.
Correct. And here's part of the problem that we're having, right? So a bunch of us on the stream are authors, right? We understand how character arc and how story dynamics should flow so that it becomes a positive experience for the reader. Even in a tragedy, there are redeeming elements for somebody in the story to take away, even though the main characters might be punished at some point. Right, so what we're having a lack of is that arc where things go and kind of evolve from one piece to another. Instead, what we're having is the same thing over and over again, where instead of playing Dungeons and Dragons that allows us to tell a collaborative story with the GM, we are now being forced through checklist after checklist just to take a few steps inside of a room. We have come up on stuff like Robert E. Howard and Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and all these great authors that wove these tales that made you want to roll some dice on the table and get some piece of that heroism or being a conqueror or whatever, of living more than epic. If I wanted a session of papers and paychecks, all I have to do is step out my door and go to work for a couple of hours, and I can get that experience. But what we're missing is the epicness that comes with most fantasy, even grimdark stuff like Game of Thrones. When they did the production value, the live action production adapted from the books, they changed several things so that the hardcore fans were like, oh my God, how could they have changed that? I have to watch to see what else they changed. The new people coming in were like, that was amazing. I have to go read the books because so-and-so is in there to see what changed. So maybe this is different and could be fun too. And all the people in the middle were like, oh my God, I'm just here for the boobs and swords, right? The problem is it's all check after check, question after question. You're never getting to see the boobs and swords. You're never swinging at any regular monsters, and even getting that moment like God, I can't remember his name. The original ranger in The Hobbit.
Legolas?
Strider.
No, not Strider. Not in The Hobbit.
Bjorn.
Yeah. So, here he is. I mean, this guy is an expert archer and hunter, and he's firing arrow after arrow at this thing, right? Until he gets that one moment where he sees that throughout all of history and all the battles, finally there was that one chink in Smaug's armor, right? So even in a totally hopeless situation, there was something, and that's really the frustration. Like even Captain Kilgosha in the chat a little while ago, he goes, it's not only frustrating for you guys, it's frustrating for the audience. And he's saying it feels like you guys are just grinding in order to build levels. It's like that old World of Warcraft thing. How did you spend your first few levels, becoming a warrior? Oh, I went into the woods and killed rats. Okay. Congratulations. Rat catcher the barbarian.
And I wonder if why that's, the chat's getting sort of, rowdy and, betting against us, because they're getting frustrated and tired by it too. I'm leaning, like we have a nice channel here. We're building stuff. There's a part of me that wants to delve through Greyhawk and see what it's all about, but I can't do Friday after
Crimson
Friday.
Hawk.
Yeah.
It's a room full of lamps. What are you gonna do?
Yep.
Well,
Right.
give us a clue about what to do. I mean, give us something. Don't just do what you want to do, which is you're a black ant.
Yeah.
That's
So let me ask you this, because you guys have all played before, and it kind of I posted it on the side chat just to remind myself. So Walt mentioned that this Lord Gazumba guy has been playing in Greyhawk for years.
40 years.
right.
40 years. Okay. So there is what is Greyhawk that is written down in all the modules, and then there's the are there any books set in Greyhawk?
Novels?
Yeah.
Yeah, tons of them. The ones I really enjoy, there was a series called Greyhawk Legends. And they're supposed to be unconnected stories, but what happened was one of the authors got really popular with his character, the main character in his novel, and they ended up doing like a series of 3 or 4 linked novels that took him through the Temple of Elemental Evil, a Village of Hamlet, and then White Plume Mountain, which were very popular at the time adventure modules for Greyhawk for D&D. And the what do you call it? The stories are fun because the main character is a disgraced ranger who in his youth fought demons, and he wears a cloak that is actually the pelt of a hellhound, and the cloak still has the sentience of the hellhound it came from. So it talks to him and taunts him the whole time while giving him advice, because it's he constantly says, if I die, you're going to be stuck down there in this hole. And even though the hellhound doesn't like him, keeps giving him advice on how to win because it's the only way he's going to keep moving through the world. And he's and totally like Greyhawk fashion, he ends up teaming up with like a like straight up literal Tinkerbell. It's like a 12-inch fairy that floats around with him and constantly ducks out of danger when things get too hairy, right? But the story is just fun, and that's the thing. There's this element of Greyhawk that became this huge sweeping world, kind of like all the different worlds in Star Wars and stuff like that. There's the free city of Greyhawk. There's the barbarians in the Stonelands. There's all these great characters that came up, and now it's this really exotic, living, breathing world, and it's a lot of fun.
So we talk about epic campaigns, but Crimson Hawk doesn't really feel like a world to me. Like I couldn't picture it. Like there's a lot of monsters, weirdly dinosaurs roaming around, which sort of, I mean, I get that was Gygax, so like I get it. But like one of the things when you helped me prepare the module I did was you can't just throw any monster in randomly so they can fight it. Why is it there? Like, and that makes sense from a storytelling point of view. So how much of Greyhawk, the lore, is the source manuals that the players get? How much of it is the books that came after, and how much of it is just people have been playing in it for 40 plus years?
There's a lot of it. I mean, it's a mixture of everything now. And when you meet somebody who plays in Greyhawk, their Greyhawk might be a little different, because not only do you have the stuff that Gygax did, but originally Greyhawk and a setting called Blackmoor were all one big, huge thing. And the problem was Dave Arneson, who was originally Gygax's kind of like buddy. They had a falling out. So there are some people who play Greyhawk with the Arneson stuff, the Blackmoor stuff in it, and then there are some people who play those two campaigns separately. But that's their like go-to world. It's like when you ask people, "Oh, what kind of sci-fi do you play?" "Oh, I play Star Wars."
And if you ever want to see like the in-depthness of like 40 years of micro focusing on one, Arneson's is called the Wildlands.
Yep.
Or Wilderlands or whatever. You go over to their Facebook page and it's like deep. Like they're they're really into it. They've got like every tree sketched out, and there's a story of every battle. They're really into it. Like, and you can do that. The cool thing about Greyhawk is it gave you enough to get a world going without having to get it all going on your own. And then what's really supposed to happen is why old school D&D is great is the characters start off as murder hobos and then they become somebody, and the land and the story and the geography and the culture and the geopolitical situation changes with them by the actions that they do. That is something that computer games try to reproduce and never will be able to, because this is live action. Like at the level we're at now, and Walt and I were talking about this last week, like we should be geopolitical figures. We should be engaging in the larger world. What are we doing? We're literally on the first level in a dungeon.
Yeah,
We never made it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because the way I describe this inevitably ends up being is I think Gygax set up the kernel of the idea of the world, and then everything else is really fan fiction around it.
So we've got some comments in the chat. We have C Smith 1510 says, as I recall, that was how Gygax was, though. I mean, the 10-foot pole didn't become famous for being a walking stick. Gygax liked to kill characters. James gives you the opportunity to kill yourself. Granted, I haven't seen all of the shows, so maybe it has gotten ridiculous. That was his comment earlier about, some of the frustrations the players are having. And then we just had Mr. BC Walker said that D&D has a fascinating history to it, and most of it has been forgotten until the last 5 years when folks have started publishing serious documentary work about the history of the game.
Yeah, and also C.S. Smith 1510. Thanks a lot for the 4-month sub, man. That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And let's just go through and answer the question for him about what we try to do in the after action report. It comes from the military. We really enjoy playing with James. We respect him because we're good people, and you should always respect your elders. And he's part of the creation of Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. But in an after action report, because you're always seeking to improve the experience, you have to be brutally honest. You have to be brutally honest about the things that are going wrong, and you also have to be brutally honest about not blowing smoke about the things that are doing right. So kind of a feature of this channel is, we played the game today. There were some frustrations. There were some moments of fun. Now we go through and we deconstruct it. We rip it apart, so that next week we don't have people saying, "Listen, this is unrecognizable."
Right. So one of the things I noticed that was different, and I think an improvement, is that a lot we've experienced in the past the slog of we're still outside twiddling our thumbs or sitting on our thumbs or whatever, and this time it felt like we kind of got started right away. Now where it fell apart was we spent an hour staring at 5 empty rooms, but that's something I think is fixable. So I think we started well in concept, if it were not for the content that we were staring at being pointless.
I learned how to wrangle James in a certain way. It's me learning too, because this isn't the hobby shop dungeon in Wisconsin where we're just going to sit around the table Saturday morning, 10 o'clock until 2 o'clock in the morning. We do have to get things done, and so I've learned, like, if I point him, like in about the 10 minutes before the show starts, where we're all behind the stage, digitally speaking, and I tell James where we're going, that gets him focused. What I have not been able to get through to him, and I've said it several times, is like, we have to move to the action fast. Yeah. It can't be it's a room. Okay, there's nothing in this room. 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 That's not a show. That's not a show.
The first room should have been the lamp room, where we go, what the hell is this? And then it was something, but it was nothing still, and then leads to something else. I don't know what the hell the Star Wars trash compactor thing was all about.
Just a chance to kill us.
Yeah, I mean, I was just like, okay. Yeah.
I wonder how that would have played out if I hadn't decided to bring the wolf kids along. Yeah, because they wouldn't have smelled it, and we'd have all just walked in and like, and you're all dead.
It's like, I still don't understand how the hell it squished. Well, he said magic, but okay, Yeah, I'm not a big believer in the whole, the rock crushing solid iron, but okay, whatever.
Yeah, I mean that's a problem that we
Yeah,
have a lot of the times is like we'll bring up things like that, actual science or whatever, and then James's default is, well, it must be magic. But
yeah.
then there's never, like
That's
the,
part of the super mummy or the super thing, which isn't an
yeah,
enjoyable aspect of the game when you can't predict. Yeah, like for instance, if you're suspicious about the trash compactor, it would be a legit way that should work. Having that stupid iron wall that Andrew could put in there that would prevent it from happening. It would be kind of cool to experience. The thing's trying to crush it. You see it buckling. You're like, all right, let's get the fuck out of here. It's like,
yeah, the old guy Gaxian party there with James and all, Gary and Ernie and all those guys, they would spend the entire day on that room trying to figure it out.
right.
And running through the science of it, and it could be done. That's, maybe it would be a really interesting show with those personalities, but it's not with us. And the modern audience isn't really geared for that. So I
So are
don't
you
think
saying
it's gonna-
sobriety killed D&D?
sobriety killed me.
Less
Yeah,
LSD
probably, yeah.
and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, the here's two things that you can tell James will do. If he doesn't, if you flummox him and say, okay, I'm putting in, a magic iron wall that won't be crushed by stone, he will then turn around and say, well, there's magic you don't know involved, which is kind of bullshit. I mean, I'm just going to call it bullshit.
Right.
And then the next thing he'll do is when he wants you to do something and you don't want to do it, or he doesn't want to give you something or whatever, suddenly a deity appears. Like, like deities are so commonplace, you could throw a rock and hit them in this game.
No, and that's why in books people hate it when you pull out the Deus Ex Machina crap. Because it's lazy. It's lazy. And it's not fun because it's like, okay, well, all right, when's the magic peanut butter going to come out so I can go spackle that and solve the problem or whatever?
But remember, since I've argued that attack, and I love James and I respect him, I'm going to argue the other attack. This is the man who wrote deities and demigods.
Right.
Like, so for him. So
he should use it. He should use it. Like, I'd like to see Asmodeus. I'd like to see some of these guys. But whatever the hell that thing was, I don't know what it was. It wasn't in deities and demigods.
Here was the real clue about James, and he said it last week. I said to him, I said, I think you said it. You said, well, does anyone ever kill the gods? And James goes, no, never. No, that would never happen. And I said, well, then why do they have stats?
Right.
And he's all, people just wanted to see him.
Well, you got a 400 hit point deity. Well, I should be able to take those down.
I don't know about you guys, but we killed the crap out of a bunch of those things when I was playing.
Yeah, exactly. And see, James is bullshitting because there's a famous Dragon article about where, I think it was Roger E. Moore, not Roger Moore. Oh, thank you, shaking money penny. Took a death machine from Gamma World and told all the other people at TSR to pick gods. And then he wailed on them with a death machine to show them how powerful a death machine from Gamma World when ported to D&D rules was. And the answer was incredibly powerful. He killed like 10 gods. So that you can kill gods. But again, it goes back to James makes monsters and he loves making them. And he has a hard time letting you wail on them. He will do anything not to kill them, which is fun. It means like if you ever played like a game where the DM wasn't invested in the monsters, or you're just chewing through them, and that can be fun sometimes. But with James, like the monsters are more James friends than you are.
I mean, to me, I could take James's side on like the whole not killing the deity type of thing in this way. Let's say that you've got the stats and deities and demigods and all that stuff,
If it bleeds, it can be killed.
and if you've got a deity, it's the corporeal version of it. So you're not really killing. You're just killing, on this plane, his instance. So now if you want to go ahead, and argue that there can't be killed, all right. Well, wherever Lolth is hiding, her home plane, there maybe she is immortal and you can't kill her there. But if she's on my plane, she's gonna get her ass kicked. You know,
So as C Smith 1510 says, gods have stats; they can die with a natural one as well as anyone.
Yeah, and that's what we tried to tell James. And James, the writer of Deities and Demigods, said, no, they can't. And that's because he wrote that book. They're his friends. He does not, like, literally at the end of the game, he pulled the trick with Andrew. As soon as Andrew used Dimension Door, he reached through and tried to grab him.
Yeah.
I lopped off that character's arms, which is, if people aren't following the show, the creature that tried to reach through and get us is a cloud giant named Ia, and that's our prime nemesis right now. So I turned her arms to stone rather than turning the entire person to stone. That should have happened. And then I suggested, like, hey, she now has 2 major arteries bleeding out.
Yep.
You're going to tell me that she's fine, losing both arms at once.
And evidently she's going to grow them back. So yeah,
she's just going to grow them back. And you're like, okay. You're like, he does not want to let you win. And the problem is that the game is about the characters, and the characters do have to win.
Right.
No. Or die
right.
trying. TPK.
Right.
But don't be it where it's constantly like wah wah. Yes, you should have tried harder. Like, don't put people in unwinnable games where they can't.
That's the problem.
Yeah,
I've said it before, but if my character dies, it wouldn't bother me as long as it's the kind of glorious death that Right Ballad's about. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you don't want to just feel like, oh, you tripped over a wire and failed the death save.
You died because you ate the moldy bread or whatever.
Yeah, your sword turned to bread and your pants fell down around your ankles, and now everybody's laughing at you. Hey, wasn't that fun, guys? You guys did really well today.
I got to tell you, what was fun was Terry looking for dip for his bread. All right, Ward, you want to play it that way? No problem. That was hysterical.
No, yeah, I mean that's the thing is, James can have his immortal gods, but they're on a different plane. If we're encountering them, they're not immortal. I mean, I think it needs to just be that way. And he needs to get over it. But whatever. We'll see.
Mr. B.C. Walker in the chat was talking about how back in the day, science fiction and fantasy wasn't such a big dividing line. So he was saying it wasn't so stark before 1980. That's why old D&D skirted the line between fantasy and science fiction so easily. A lot of the genre fiction informing D&D's creation is as much sci-fi as it is fantasy, and there's plenty of weird fiction that go along with it. So
that's true.
Yeah, there's
like the John Carter stuff, all that kind of stuff is, and D&D, like they're and I tested this theory because I read an article that someone wrote, and they said, if you really look at Dungeons and Dragons, it's actually a post-apocalyptic setting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're saying, like, not necessarily modern, but they're saying it's clear that much of the world is ruined. There's ruins, and they went and laid out all these arguments and everything like that.
Well, it's like Middle Earth.
And they said this would have totally been like, all these guys were playing D&D in the 70s. They had the threat of nuclear war hanging over their heads.
Yeah.
It very well could. And so I went to James and I said, like, is this theory true? And he goes, no. Like, okay. All right. It
You're
seems
wrong.
very post-apoc. But it seems very like much of the world is unknown. You have to go out and, now the problem with Greyhawk is much of the world is known. It is an active, living, breathing world. But generally, when you play D&D in any kind of campaign, like, very little is known.
Right.
And that's like, okay, so how did they start the first modules? Into the unknown.
Yeah.
Keep on the borderlands. Like, those were your launching off places. You were going beyond the map, which is my favorite kind of fun concept for high fantasy adventure. D&D and stuff like that is like the characters entering a sort of like Lost type world. And then trying to put the pieces together. No,
exactly. I mean, to me, that's what's entertaining. I mean, like even on the novel that I'm messing with, it is purposefully, all the history has been lost of wherever the hell this guy's in, and there's no maps for some places, which is a foreign concept to us on Earth. Everything's mapped and we know everything, but in a fun campaign, you don't know what's next. You don't know what you're going into a cave. Okay, I don't know what's in the cave. Well, let's find out. Yeah.
Are you going to go into this town and deal with these people? Well, they don't like you. Why don't they like you? And like,
right.
if you're going to play like an active, living, breathing world like Greyhawk, like you can just get a taste of that from Andre. He's like, oh, you're Hasid, and you speak this, and you have these things. And these are your predilections against, and it's like too much. It's like, okay, it puts you on this rails of role playing. You're like, yes, I'm from the Flyness, and this is the shit we have against these people. You're like, like I kind of just like, I mean, it's sort of like, it's very like, if you ever go back and watch 70s television, which is really just like a lot of shows where like two good-looking drifters wander into town and solve crimes.
Yeah, it's a little cheesy.
That's a perfect module for me. A bunch of good-looking murder hoes wander into town, solve your monster problem, and next week they're solving someone else's. And over the course of 10 adventures, you begin to put together a story. A nemesis arises. One of the, like if you play Keep on the Borderlands, you've got some monsters down in there that they can easily plague your characters and grow with your characters as time goes.
So Mr. BC Walker says the most authentic D&D experience begins with just one hex on the map being occupied, each adjacent hex being shown, and the rest of the map is blank. The campaign fills in the map as the PC groups go beyond what is known. Very easy to handle as a DM.
See, that tells me that BC Walker is legit. Because he's absolutely right. Like the first thing that I knew he was legit is he said hex map, which is like, like hex map is so old school, but it really is. And like, you can use the Dungeon Master's Guide to run a campaign with no planning and all on dice tables. And you can have a great time doing it.
No, if you think about it, it is dice tables. It is all about, okay, you're going north. Let me figure out what's there. Roll the dice, and you got a large room.
Look, you ran into pilgrims. Okay, what's their alignment? Lawful evil. Okay, these guys are dicks.
Let's blow them up.
let's burn them. But you have to the problem is you really have to know that Dungeon Master's Guide.
Right.
But having a random campaign, actually rolling random monsters, going down into a dungeon and rolling up a random dungeon as you go, like the story makes itself. Like, well, why are we hearing a moaning noise? Because there's a table for random noises that you hear. Why does this room have an altar? All that kind of stuff.
I mean, it's like pantsing versus plotting. It's like from a book writing perspective. It's like
my contention is that if you did that in this group, a bunch of science fiction writers, we would help create the story for you.
Yeah.
We just need it. But right now it's like, no, you're a piece of bread. No, you're an ant. Your pants fell down. The monster sodomized you.
So let me ask the audience this. So right now I have the B1 and B2 module. So Into the Unknown and to Keep on the Borderlands. I think
anything else.
No. So do we try to port those over and make that Greyhawk 2, or just play them as is?
What do you mean?
Well, like right now we're CrimsonHawk because Greyhawk is trademarked and Wizards of the Coast sues people, right? So do we try to make it our own thing and do that from the beginning, or just play it as written and let it be what it'll be?
Why is this even a question?
I'm
why
curious
are you posing the question?
I'm curious what the audience likes.
Walt and JR interact.
No, I'm asking the audience what they would prefer.
Sure.
Do they like just seeing the module as it is and playing like the old school, or try to make it its own cohesive universe?
Well, no, I mean, I think it's a cohesive thing because, so you're going to get 5 players to play, and they're going to start playing, and if you have some interesting people in there, people are going to be like, oh, I want to know more about their adventures. And so your best, that's kind of what Walt and I were doing this week is we were trying to say, okay, well, what really is this? And I think the answer that Walt and I might be coming to is that James's CrimsonHawk is merely a weird city that's in this strange area of a world that we're maybe thinking about putting together that maybe is Greyhawk or Greyhawk-like. and then sort of running our own kind of adventures in there and having fun, and maybe taking a break from Crimson Hawk every so
Right.
often, and actually having these other elements that we're talking about.
I mean, I think you could easily have, a large map. Crimson Hawk is just a plug-in module that has a whole bunch of stuff in it, and then any other story, whether it's what JR started, or Andrew, or who, or Walt, or whoever. I mean, they're all just you're in a shared universe of stuff. You got the same basic kind of monsters and whatever, just different storyboard. That
Yeah.
just plugs in. It's somewhere on the map. Does it really matter where?
Yeah.
No.
I would make, like, if I were making a world, and Walt and the world Walt and I are talking about, like, I would put Crimson Hawk in this, like, weird little sort of, like, it's like Lost, the island Lost.
Yeah.
And it's kind of in this weird place, and, like, all the ridiculousness of, like, there's dinosaurs and people have bread swords. It just kind of stays in that weird place. But, like, yeah, when you go to the jungle, you're not going to run into snow apes.
Yeah.
And no, there's no dinosaurs, out on the Shattered Seas, or, the Sea of Dust, or whatever. Like, you're gonna roll on the table for those things, and that's what's gonna be there.
Crimson's like Australia, where you got all this weird menagerie of bizarreness, and everywhere else is more predictable.
Yeah, it's like lethal Disneyland.
Yeah.
Disneyland has no bearing to the rest of the world.
Right.
It's just you just go there, and it's a ridiculous place.
Yeah.
So we get Grape Ape and Shadow the Illustrator say, make our own world and then fit the modules into it. Yeah. Captain Gokosha says he has no opinion. He just wants blood and heads rolling and a coherent story.
Yeah.
And
story is key, I think.
C. Smith said he's conflicted.
So I want to kind of dive into what you're talking about, JR. Just keep in mind, when you play a module, like if you take those adventures that you have and you run people through them online, like you create a virtual game table, like we have, and just let people roll dice online. It is no different than if you it's no different than if you were playing a video game on Twitch, like all these other video gamers, right? So you have the right to play through this, and have people sit down at your table, play through it. You can say, oh yeah, with module B1 it's set in this town, and in Crimson Hawk we're putting it right here, and that's totally legal, right? Yeah. The only time it gets weird is if you say, now we're going to sell it to you, right? And now that's when you're running into trouble. Right? So you could totally have, like, if you got some people from your writers group or something like that and said, hey, we can do this separate show where we play through some of the old beginning modules and it would help me learn this. You could do that online with no trouble at all, and nobody would give you any crap. But if you were like, hey, we're going to take the covers off and we're going to slap our own covers on it and sell it, you can't do that. That's illegal.
But if you think about it, because I recently bought like B1 through 12 or whatever, just because I was gonna run the family through some of these modules, because my wife's never played and I'm gonna force her
confront her mortality.
Yeah. So I started looking at them, because when I played DnD, I never played any modules. They were all hand rolled, and I look at them. There's not much to them. I mean, they're all like 30, 35 pages. It's very simple. I mean, any one of us have written oodles more than any of that stuff. Maybe all of them combined easily. Any one novel is more than all of the B modules together. So, there's really not much there to take from. I mean, I think
but out of the good ones, they're balanced.
Right. I think that's the art. That's the art of it. Is understanding, what the equation would be for the levels of the characters that you're playing and the number of them versus the hit dice of the things that you're going to encounter. I think that's the thing where you need to learn from those modules how the balance works. But as soon as you got that formula down, it's trivial to make up any of the make up your own module, basically, and then it's kind of like a start of any novel.
Some of the interesting thing, though, like, and the thing that maybe you're underestimating a little bit, is the room descriptions that you get with those modules. You have to remember, the average person is not creative.
Right.
So they're like, okay, you go into like, to an extent, James is kind of this kind of DM. Like, it's a square room. Okay, now pick up any Ravenloft module and read the
Oh
description for
yeah.
any room, even the most meaningless water closet,
So
and it will
I
fill
need to
you
look.
with a sense of dread.
So I need to look at those because the B modules didn't impress me with their descriptions. I mean, I think there's
They're
some
they're
sections.
Yeah, but remember, these are all modules that are written 79, 78,
Right.
and they're
Sure.
for the very beginning of D&D, where people, you got to remember, like 4 years prior to this, people were like, hey, let's get together and play miniatures. And they're playing miniatures, and they're
Yeah.
like, wouldn't it be funny if I went in this castle over here? Yeah,
Right.
that'd be funny. Maybe there'd be a dragon in there. I don't know, does anyone have a 20? I mean, like, literally,
Yeah.
they were just putting it
Oh
together.
no, no. Yeah.
But when you reach the Ravenloft modules, I'm not kidding. Like, the room description in that, and the world building in that, like, is so on point. It's crazy. Like, and for you as a DM to sit down, like, I'm going to run the family through. If you wrote out something equivalent to a Ravenloft room description and then sat down with your family to play it, like, all you would do looking up from your little, paragraph that you wrote and looking at your family would just be like mouths gaping in horror.
No.
One, that it's so disgusting, but two, like, you literally sat down and wrote all this shit down. Like, and that's the thing you get out of modules. Like, for the non-creative person, you get mood and atmosphere out of those room descriptions.
Right. No, no, no. 100% agree. And what I ended up having to do, because tomorrow I'm playing with family, is I took like I forget which B module it was, B4 or whatever. But anyway, and I ended up taking all the rooms that were there, because a lot of them are just they're like 3 sentences. It's not intended to be really read as a description per se. It was kind of notes to the DM. It seemed like to me. And I ended up writing out longhand the descriptions for each room, so I didn't have to make it up on the fly. Because the descriptions that were in the original B modules weren't very inspiring. And it sounds like what you're talking about, the Ravenloft, I've never looked at. Sounds like it's a totally different thing.
Yeah, but
But
they're Tracy Hickman. So, like,
okay,
I mean,
yeah,
that guy was, a lot of the module designers didn't become writers.
right, right,
I
right,
mean, they probably have, but, like, Hickman is legit, and
right.
so they are, and they can be. You just have to remember, like, D&D is written for people who didn't have that skill set, but they wanted to play. They had the
Right.
imagination. They just didn't necessarily have the verbal word skills to
Right,
make it happen.
and to be honest, I'm not even sure. Even after having read it, the rationale behind some of the modules, other than to create a nice skeleton of what a campaign would be, but it's certainly not. In my opinion, wasn't enough as is for like a scene stirring kind of description. I mean, those original modules weren't sufficient, but it was a good start to me.
Right, and they're not epic either, as in
Yeah.
they do come out of the 70s storytelling of, like, good looking drifters come to town, solve the murder. Like,
Right. Right.
it's not an ongoing. The Ravenloft ones do kind of get into story arc,
Right.
but limitedly so. It's not till it's probably not till Dragonlance where
Yeah.
modules start, like, now you do this, and now you're ready for this thing to happen and stuff like that,
Yeah.
which is all storytelling is now. And I kind of just miss, like, just drifting, like, hey, we solved that small city's problem of giants. And like, I think, like, if you play correct me if I'm wrong, well, the giant module, like, that's
Yeah, those are good
basically
against the
like
giants.
yeah, those, like, take forever. Like, you got to
Yeah.
do a bunch of stuff. It's almost like a sandbox kind of world.
And then if you look at like later on when companies like Paizo started taking over Dungeon, um, and I can send you some of those, Mike, to take a look at. The Like, for example, when they decided, like, hey, we're gonna put together connected adventures for people to play through,
Hmm.
and they started developing the first like real adventure paths, not so much like against the giants, where it was like these three adventures can be played independently or separately.
Right.
It was like, nope, these adventures are connected. and they lead from one story to another. So like you legit ended up starting at level 1 and go all the way to level 20 through a series of adventures sold as magazines, and they did really well. And then they collected them all in this great leather bound editions, and
Tome.
they were tome. They're huge, like 500 pages. But like the thing is, like you saw the evolution of when those started, of what D&D was going to start to become, because of the fact that now you had professional writers, like the guy who does Critical Role, Matt Mercer. Right, he understands what how a room should be described. He understands that the theatrics of being a GM. Like if you ever watch him on Critical Role or anything like that, he does one of the principal traits that I really feel differentiates a great GM from like an okay GM, is that he doesn't sit down at the table. He stands. And because sitting, you got your arms and whatever, but when you got your whole body feeding into a performance, you can really get into stuff, and you see that, you feel it at the table. I mean, even in a digital space, you can kind of feel it. So it's it's fun.
So I'm curious, because this is the impression I got from the B modules, was there was no. I mean, I guess anything, a visit to the neighbor could be a story arc, but there was no real story arc in as much as that there was an ending to any of the modules. It was more you wander in, and then there's something to explore, and that was the extent of it.
That's correct.
It was not a story arc in the way that a story, a modern day story that I had imagined. Are later modules more story arc-ish?
Well, it depends. What are you looking for? Are you looking for an adventure where you're interacting with townspeople?
Or it's like save the princess. There's a goal, and then you get to the goal. Whatever the goal is.
Once again, what are you looking for in that experience? Are you looking for Indiana Jones with a sword? Then you want Journey to Castle Greyhawk. Because it's a castle that was abandoned after a major traumatic event, and then a bunch of monsters just moved in. Right. There's your Indiana Jones just investigating the temple. There are no Nazis. The Nazis took the day off. It's just the monsters inside, like the snakes and shit, and you just got to deal with that. Do you want like epic story and stuff like that, and you want adventure modules that start like political intrigue, saving the princess, right? You jump ahead 10-15 years, and now you're talking Dark Walker on Moonshae set in the Forgotten Realms. And even that is like almost like high art, because those originally the Moonshae Isles was supposed to be its own separate campaign setting, but at the time money was weird. It was a TSR, so they just rolled it right into the Forgotten Realms as like a separate island kind of thing. Right.
So that brings it back to what we're doing now, though. What do we want in the campaign that we're doing? Do we want the epic tale with a goal in the end, or is it just an exploration of CrimsonHawk or whatever? Is there a goal? Like right now, we've got this war with this fantastical giantess or whatever, but what are we trying to do with this? What is our goal? In our campaign that we're doing now.
From the party, we don't really have one. We just wander around trying to kill things and take their shit.
Yeah, I mean, but and is that the extent of it? I mean, is that truly the goal? Or
Prometheus had a goal. I always had a goal, and it was why I wanted to do this with James. Is I wanted to get to the bottom of the castle.
Okay.
James told me one time a cryptic thing. He said, "Listen," I said, "What's at the bottom? What's at the lowest level?" Or he wouldn't tell me, and I said, "Did you kill it?" And he goes, "Oh no, that thing couldn't be killed." And so that intrigued me.
Yeah.
And so Prometheus has his own goals in life. About obviously he's a lunatic, but for him it was like, oh well. To become an even greater lunatic, then I would probably want the power of the thing at the bottom of the castle.
Sure.
That seems fairly impossible because we're still on the first level. And like if I added up all of Kabuki's experiences right now, I think he'd be like 12th or 13th level.
Right.
So, but he's just now he's a 19 hit dice monster.
Right.
So I don't know, but what would I like to do? I'd
Right.
like to do a campaign. It would be fun to actually play in Greyhawk. It'd be fun to make like new characters at first level, pick a new area, and start out and kind of begin to interact with the world. Maybe go on some limited adventures. Maybe actually fold in a module.
Right.
But begin, since there's so much enthusiasm, so it would be, science fiction writers playing Greyhawk. And I think that would be interesting storytelling for us. We could come back to CrimsonHawk, and journey through this silliness. But like, for my Friday afternoon, I enjoyed about 10 minutes of it today when I got involved and started causing trouble. That's when that's the 10 minutes I enjoyed. And that's the 10, not to be arrogant, that's the 10 minutes that it got interesting.
So Rothman, C.S. Smith said if you reach out to him, so if you give your email right now to him, he'll get you a copy of 16 Ravenloft or a different Ravenloft module through drive-through. He'll gift you one so you can try it.
That's I6, I believe it is.
Oh, is it I6? Okay.
Yeah. Mike at michael.a.rothman.com.
Try either just like Ravenloft or like Feast of Goblins is weird, but Ravenloft is just such a crazy, interesting world.
Yeah.
And but Ravenloft has a great insanity mechanic in it. That's a lot of fun. But you don't want to play that with the family. What characters is the fam going to run?
Well, for the B module, it's just starting off. It's the basic fighter, magic user, and thief kind of thing. So I mean, there's nothing special about the B modules.
So have they rolled their characters, or
they're all rolled.
So what are they? So what are the Rothmans playing? That's what I'm asking.
I forget which is which. I know my wife is a healer, so she's a cleric. I think my eldest son is a wizard, and the other one is the rogue. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And the cool thing about the B modules is you can also play an elf.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they
and elf gets fireball at 3rd level, which is fun.
Yeah. I have to go look. I don't remember what races they chose. So.
I think we should make a group of hobbits.
Oh my god.
and just call them hobbits and just wait to get sued.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, the original stuff had halflings, so yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's halflings still exist, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the we went to a game convention and not like after doing comic book conventions for years after years after years, I couldn't take it anymore. So like going to something like Gen Con or something that will never happen. I'll never go.
We'll never go.
But something like, hey, we're having this convention for 40 or 50 people at my house, which I used to do all the time in the early 2000s, and I thought it was the greatest thing ever. They have this website called underworld where it's kind of like a D&D clearinghouse of all the news and what people are doing and stuff like that. And somebody put an announcement up one day and was like, hey, I'm doing an at-home convention, and we went. And one of the funniest things ever was, and I used to try and sign up for the game every single time I went, was the players started off in prison as goblins. And you were captured during a raid on a castle, like a group of knights did a dungeon dive, and your crew, your like chieftain, surrendered. So you were all put in jail until they figured out, or in the camp under guard until they figured out what to do with you. And they come up with you with a choice. EN World, beware that place, and RPG Net. Both are hives of social justice warrior insanity. Well, I don't know. I don't really go to either one of those places just because anymore. Because it just seems like everything devolves into a lot of arguing, and I don't need that in my life. So the captain of the knights comes up to you and says, I can make you richer than any goblin lord in the past. If you work for me, I need an inside man. And the players agree, hopefully agree to act as double agents inside of Goblin Society and act as sappers and just start wrecking shit. And it was so much fun because the first two sessions was the first session was you go back to where you came from and like poison the new chief. And then the second session was the orcs that kind of lorded over you had just started moving into the castle where they had just cleared out, and they wanted you to poison their wargs, so they're riding wolves and stuff. But the third adventure was where it got interesting because they wanted you to help prep a town to repel an orc attack, but you're goblins, so they don't want you there. And like the role playing was hysterical. You go in, you got this letter of marque from the knight saying that you're his agent and want to be there. And one of the player characters was a human knight. It was the only human in the party. Everybody else was goblins. And the player at the time, this guy was just hysterical because he was like a dad trying to herd 6 kids who had just got off the bus at Disney. And it was just, oh my God, it was so funny. But like, you're trying to teach this farmer, this is how you use a spear. He's like, how am I supposed to take you seriously? You are 3.5 feet tall, and your spear is like as long as my chair leg. And it just, oh my God, so stuff like that can be really, really interesting too.
Yeah. Yeah, playing like interesting monster stuff is always kind of fun. I think one thing that I have seen lacking in campaigns that I think would be interesting, which kind of ties into what you're saying there, is like it would be interesting if people would actually play races as races instead of kumbaya. Like the elves are really dicks and they don't like each other. Anybody. And the dwarves are dicks and they don't like anybody either. And basically every race is a dick to every race and they won't have anything to do with you. And I think that's kind of fun. Like it's not, not from a racist standpoint or anything like that. It just kind of makes it makes some interesting choices, and it makes some interesting combat opportunities. Like if you end up you say like, okay, let's all play a party of dwarves of various things. Well, now you can go like have dwarf and elf wars, that are always referred to in every history. Until the players start rolling dice, and suddenly it's like elves and dwarves are best friends. Now you're in modern D&D, and even this demon is their friend, and everybody's a friend. It's like, and now as I understand it, the orcs are friends too. Like the monsters are now friends, and that's no fun. I mean, like the fun of D&D is wailing on stuff,
and
to wail on stuff you must have animosity.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like, we were talking about this, God, not even 2 months ago. Like with the orcs, it's like, or I saw that article where everybody was like, well, we can't have kobolds with low scores because that's discriminatory. It's like it's a freaking 2-foot rat with a snake head. It's not going to be able to bench press 400 pounds. I'm sorry.
Yeah, see, the thing for me is, this is the same argument where, let's just stick to humans for now. But male and female, there's a valid argument that says, writing a woman badly is, you're making them, basically guys with boobs. So that's probably not a fair portrayal of what a woman should be written as. So to me, taking that to D&D, it's like, in my mind, kobolds should have a very specific personality type, and just like dwarves should, just like everyone else should, and they may not necessarily be pleasant to deal with. But if everybody is just a different flavor of human behavior, what's the point?
And but there's a danger in you're X race, so you absolutely have to hate heights or whatever, and that always felt lazy to me when I saw that. Like, you're going to have outliers. I mean, you might have some traits that are the same, but the idea that they're all just cookie cutters of themselves doesn't work either.
Well, not necessarily
Well,
cookie
right,
cutters, right? But you have to understand, the I saw this. It was in the Death Dealer books, right? There are races in there that when he's dealing with them, people are like, "Why are you so quick to just pound on them?" And he doesn't talk a lot in the books, but he says straight out, they're not human. They don't think like you. You're not. You don't walk up to a village of these things and just have a conversation. They don't understand when you walk up to the village what you're doing, because to them it is the sheep walking up to the wolf to have a conversation.
right.
He's like, and that's what I think is lacking in a lot, because I don't think it should be an allegory for human race,
Right.
because
Right.
human race is just skin color and culture. I mean, big deal.
Yeah, I mean, there is no difference. I mean,
Yeah.
in races and humans. I mean,
Right.
we're fundamentally the same.
Yeah.
And that's and if we're gonna have actual different races,
Let's make them different.
there should be a history. There should be a kind of a built-in behavior. I would assert. Let's imagine dwarves. Are short because they lived underground for many millennia, and so they naturally grew shorter. And when they're above ground, they're like, oh my god, how the hell do you deal without having a ceiling?
Yeah. That kind of deal.
yeah.
Or I think one of the best depictions
Vitamin D deficiency.
Yep.
Yeah, well,
One of the best depictions of racial differences was in Dark Sun. Because they actually treated the different races as very alien to each other. Like, for example, the halflings in Dark Sun were cannibals, and they were very vicious and very hard to deal with. They had elves. Elves in Dark Sun were alien. Like, you don't just walk up and talk to an elf unless you were really on your game, because 9 times out of 10 they were scheming about something, and the other one time that they're not scheming about something, they're dealing with magic. So, and magic in that setting is very dangerous and very alien. So, like, even like the half breeds, like in normal, what do you call it? Normal D&D, you have the what do you call it? Half elves.
Half elves and half orcs.
Yep. And in Dark Sun you had mules, which are half dwarf, half humans, but when they are after they are born, they go through this genetic transition where if they live, they outpace both parents. And so, like, neither parentage want to have them around. The dwarfs don't like them because when they reach their full height, they're almost 8 feet tall and immensely powerful. The humans don't like them because not only are they that tall and that powerful, but they're also usually very smart. So what did both races do? They enslaved them, right? So I mean that.
Yeah. And imagine you have a lot of those. There's a built-in history. There's a built-in behavior that's learned, over the generations, and that's where I think that's what makes storytelling interesting, whether it's in D&D campaigning or just regular stories. There is a difference. You're learning something new, and you understand why someone is being the way they are.
Yeah.
That to me is cool.
Yeah, I would like, if we were to do a campaign, I would like those elements, like going back to the alienness of other races.
Mm-hmm.
Making like, just like in Tolkien, he tries to stress how alien the elves are. That
Right.
they're all about something else. You never see people like even give a nod to that in D&D. It's just like the elf walks in like, "Hey everybody, I'm your elf friend." It's like,
Yeah.
like, I mean, like, try to play an elf like a Michael Moorcock elf, like, just
God.
tired of living, and addicted addicted to some kind of drug, and just into like some really weird shit where people really question their sanity, and even talking to you would be fun.
Well, no, I mean that's the cool thing, because if you ever think about what would it be like? Because elves, certainly in the token world, we're immortal. Or at least very, 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 very long lived. So what would it be like to live for thousands of years? You might get a little get a little attitude. Yeah,
But you
that's
have
different.
like so take your average dungeon, and that's what D&D is
Yeah,
Dungeons and Dragons. The human character's motivation for going down into the dungeon is humans are capitalists. There
yeah,
is no leftism yet. Humans are purely like, let's make stuff. We need money,
right,
or banditry or warfare. Like, humans are very industrial people. And so if a murder hobo has decided to get his group together and go down into the dungeon, it is for economic gain. The elf, on the other hand, doesn't need economic gain.
yeah,
The elf is going down there because it's bored to death.
right.
Now,
Yeah.
is it bored to death, or does it have some higher calling? Like, well, we see what humans are up to, and we think they'd be pretty good allies against the orcs. So let's help them. Like, let's go help them find this. Like, the elf, I always thought, should have, like, if they're gonna be really long lived, they should have this innate lore ability. So when the humans go down there, the elf's able to say, yeah, this tower was made by this wizard, and we beat the snot out of him about 1,000 years ago, but we never went down into the lower levels, and there was a sword down there that is really powerful, and the elf should be able to tell you some lore about what's down in there, and then that's his motive. If he's good, his motivation is he wants to help humans, because humans are the bigger stick to hit orcs with.
Right.
But he's not down there for economic gain. He has treasure, or he doesn't. He has natural magic. Though something would have to be really interesting for him to get into it. Why do you take the dwarves down there? What is their motivation for going? And maybe that's where the alienness comes in. I can't really think of a motivation of why a dwarf would ever leave what they have and go down into a dungeon, because they live
I
in
could.
dungeons. No one
Special,
asked you.
some sort of special ore that they need to make something.
Yeah, they would go down for research purposes. That would be
Right.
like, they're not, yeah, the money's a good thing, but they already mine and make money. And magic, I always kind of thought, like, in a certain way, dwarves were pretty tribalistic about their magic. Like, we have our magic, and like, they're like, dwarves are the snake handlers of magic. Like, I was born a snake handler and I'll die a snake handler.
Yeah.
Like, they're kind of hillbillies, but they're not there for monetary gain. And they dwarves have learned, like, don't go poking around where you're not supposed to be, and so they're
Yeah.
cautious. So is a dwarf really going to be, like, down there wanting to kill? Like, people play dwarves as, I'm all Scottish McDrunkard, I love to kill everything. Well, that's not really dwarves. Like, if you look at the dwarven mindset, they're burrowing animals. They're very family oriented. None of these things bespeak, I want to go crawl around with murder hobos in strange places.
Right.
So you can't make that now, and we know the halflings won't. So they're recruited as burglars, obviously, or stealthy type people, and there has to be something that takes them. There has to be some calling. Curiosity is the thing that you could use, but, like, in all, and you can always have exceptions to the rules, but, like, people don't play races. They just play. I get con. I get this class. I get these things,
Yeah.
but they never play, like, why is the elf there? Why is the dwarf there? Why is the half-orc is a mercenary? He'll go anywhere, and he really doesn't much care, and life sucks everywhere, so why not go do this? And maybe you'll get to stab all these motherfuckers in the back and take their money.
Yep. No, no, yeah, and I think motivation really is it's a fun thing to play. Because, like, going back to the elf, who are, like, long lived and everything else. What if they have a very longer view of the world, and they see something going wrong, and they're trying to fix it, because they're going to have to deal with it 1,000 years from now. So that may motivate them to do something that may not necessarily be obvious to us, because the problem is maybe still a century away, but for them it's tomorrow. Yeah, it's like, so they have different motivations than we might have, but it would be very easy to incorporate those into reasonable stories.
Captain K in the chat is like, that's why I never read stories about elves or dwarves, because they're always just humans. One is the short humans, and the other are the tall humans.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
and he's spot on about that. And it would be interesting more to play the alienness of the tribes, which is what is attempting to be brainwashed out of our society. I actually think that in the next 2 to 5 years, you will actually see D&D cancel itself. As in, they're working towards this conclusion already.
I know.
And what they're eventually going to say is they're going to say, like, listen, this game is inherently racist. The creators are all racist. We really shouldn't be playing this game. We have this new thing called, just sitting around talking as a fantasy. Furries is what really want to be.
Fantasy furries.
And we're all friends and we adventure together and have sex in our costumes.
No,
Um,
How dare
but
you
but
judge them so?
I can't.
no,
but
but
they don't want to play D&D.
no, no,
They don't.
no, exactly. Because if you think about it, it's always who's the boogeyman. So right now is the orcs. You're evil, so everybody needs to be nice. And now that at some point in time everybody's going to be nice. So who's the next thing in the D&D scape that needs to get killed? And it's maybe D&D itself. So I think
No,
Nick, you're
I
right.
think that's the end game is that
Yeah,
you eventually you eventually, the AI eventually realizes it's the problem and
right,
turns itself off.
right.
Like and that's the biggest problem the society has right now
Yeah,
is we go, okay, you've canceled that thing. That's enough, right, guys? And they're like, no, we thought of 6 more things to cancel because canceling is fun. If you keep following that thing, yeah, you do get canceled D&D and you do get death camps. It's going that way whether you like it or not.
So
That I already can tell you the lead figures at D&D who have been the biggest proponents and champions and like, look what wonderful thing I did and I made D&D inclusive. And when the troglodytes like us who keep playing D&D and keep insisting on slaughtering kobolds, they'll say, it's really problematic and maybe we just need to shut the thing off. Maybe there won't be a 6.0. And wizards, because you would say, like, well, why would wizards shoot them in the face right now and like shoot themselves in the foot like that? But you literally do see major corporations right now turning off their products because they have an emotional gun pointed at their head by the left. So I
yeah.
think you actually will see D&D cancel itself.
So, bringing this back around, because I am the master of the blunt force segue. Um, where do we want to dip our toes in the water now? Do we want to do what Nick was suggesting and get that first level experience? Because all of our
Yeah,
characters
I think we
started
do.
at third.
Yeah. No, I'd like to start off as first. I'd like to start off as a first level character and go through a first level dungeon. Whether we make a homebrew setting or we do Greyhawk, which is interesting because we have this relationship with all these Greyhawk other streamers, and maybe we do the science fiction writers playing old school Greyhawk, our version, and we begin to incorporate our, JR sets his campaign out on, the mountains between whatever's out between that and the Sea of Dust, and that's the Borderlands. And I really enjoy Walt's style of DMing. If you've ever played with him, you will just have a blast with Walt DMing. He gets it on a lot of levels.
Well,
He's better than Matt Mercer.
Oh, don't you? Oh God, I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight now. But don't forget, Monday we have.
That's right. Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, Monday we have White Star, which is old white box D&D with the Star Wars numbers filed off, and then so yeah, we're going to be doing that as part of our lunchtime test drive. So
I don't
yeah.
have a character.
Oh, I got you covered. You just got to let me know what flavor of pirate you want, and none of those nice pirates either.
And these are star pirates, right?
Of course, they're star pirates.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'll
only
have to
grade
think
A
up,
pirates for you.
yeah, I'll have to think up a stellar rogue archetype. Is that what we're doing?
Whatever you want. Because
Okay, cool.
the idea is, yeah, Captain K is like it has to
Oh,
be.
I know what I want to play. I want to play Stink Eye.
Yes. Oh, I got you. No problem.
Okay, cool.
I got you.
Mercenary space wizard.
I got you. So it'll be awesome. Yeah, I know exactly how to do it too. Yeah, that won't be a problem.
Okay, cool. See, that was easy.
Yep, that was easy. So we got so far we got mercenary stink eye, right? Which is the yeah, the drunken vindictive space wizard.
Drunken vindictive space.
Right. We have the big furry hairy archetype, AKA Chewbacca. He's gonna play one. We have a tinkerer who manages to put together like an assault suit. And then whatever JR is going to want to play something with a heavy machine gun.
I loved being a saw gunner, man. It was like the bright spot of my life.
So I was thinking, hey, you with the feet, knock it off. I was thinking giving you like something like a. I was thinking about giving you, making you something like a Marcus Phoenix type. So you are a big armored jerk with a fully automatic rifle that has a bayonet that's a chainsaw on it.
I can dig that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, chainsaw AK-47 is always the way to go.
Yep.
I still can't believe I didn't actually hit a single monster today.
I didn't either.
So-
I just knew everything that I was going to do was useless. So I was like, okay. But I think like the great thing is that I was thinking about like how did I turn that chick to stone? Was I whined to James? I'm like, well, okay, so another thing I done, and like he sensed like, oh no, I'm shutting him down too much, and so he was perfectly primed for me to go, James, I want to do something. He's like, okay, you can do whatever. I'm like, okay.
So
now
I
your
actually
monster doesn't have arms.
So I roll my dice right before the encounter because I'm slow with the math, so that way I can keep the show moving. And I actually got for a fight that never happened, but my last roll I actually got 3 20s in a row because I just threw I'm like, that's never gonna happen again, never.
Don't throw that. Just roll that sheet over to next week.
Yeah.
Yep. There you go. And then yeah, so don't worry though, on Monday 20s are going to be 20s. Oh yes.
Ooh, yeah. Double damage.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But oh god, I put the maps together today, and I got to send out characters today too. But there was at some point I needed to sleep. I was starting to shut down. I actually started drooling on my keyboard. I'm like, yeah, I gotta go to bed. But yeah, I put the maps together today, and I sent out a couple of the characters because they're super easy to put together. Oh my god, White Star is so easy. Because all that old white box stuff was just roll 3d6, put it together, and don't worry about craziness because it's super hyper simple, and you're never going to get over level 10. So there you go.
Why are you never?
Here's what we should do.
Oh, go ahead. Okay. Go ahead first, Nick, and then I'll answer his question.
Here's what we should do. If we do a new campaign, we should roll up. We should have a session where we roll up characters.
Oh yeah.
And we use a dice roller, and I'll be nice and say 46.
46.
That's your stat. Yeah, and there's no like, and you can organize the numbers however you want. Let's do it that way. But none of this my character has some high stats. We all have high stats. But I'd love to just see some average characters go play D&D.
And that's
the fighter average? With the 14 strength.
Yep.
14. I think 14 is completely average.
Yeah.
I think I started with 15s, and Walt said that was a little unusual.
Yeah, because that's high.
It's unusual because it's high, but it's unusual also because if you play D&D with most people, somebody's going to have I was shocked one time when I played and someone started with a 20 strength. We were playing we were paying 3.5 or whatever, and I'm like, what? You don't start with that. But when I was a kid and you went into a game store and someone was DMing, like, okay, roll a character. It was 3-6. Mm-hmm. You're like, but I have intelligence. They're like, yeah, you can play that one, you idiot. Okay.
And it's funny too because an 8 intelligence is back then was the minimum intelligence you needed for a wizard.
Yeah.
So I used
well, if you think about it, the average roll would be like a 10.5. I mean, realistically. So,
but
average.
There's mechanics that I always thought was more interesting. Okay, so between adventures, what does your character do? Okay, well, I'm a wizard. well, I'm going to go and I'm going to dive into the library for a week and I'm going to really get good. And, low levels, and if you're playing on it, the DM goes, okay, I'm going to give you a point of intelligence. Like, if you can think up something creative to increase your skill at low levels, it makes it much more fun.
Yeah.
And it makes the campaign come alive. But if everybody is already starting like, of course I'm a wizard, so I have an 18 intelligence. I'm a cleric, I have an 8. Like, literally, the modern party is like a bunch of freaks, as opposed to what D&D really initially was like
Normal people.
normal people, and then you got good. So
Yeah.
that would be a thing I would insist on: is we all roll dice, and you take that loser.
And then,
So I did my dice rolling with, was it the Dragon's Foot thing Walt put me
Yeah.
onto? So, and I just took whatever it was, but I screenshotted everything because Walt's like, that doesn't sound right. So I was like, here's the picture.
Well, that's the thing too, because
Yeah.
like this is the first game I've ever played where everybody was like, "No, you need an 18 in this," and it's like, what? Like
Yeah.
when I submitted my first character to James, uh, Andrew was the one who shot it back, and I'm like, "Oh wow, James has an assistant." Um, he shot it back, and he's like, "No, you need to put this as an 18 and this blah blah blah." I'm like, "Yeah, but that's not what I rolled." You know what I mean? And
So is that
Yeah.
abnormal to move them around?
yes. Yeah, back in the day, you rolled
You
originally.
rolled whatever. Strength was a strength. Your
Yeah,
intelligence.
you rolled
your intelligence.
3d6, and based on what you got, that would
Yeah.
be determine what character class. You didn't just pick.
Yeah,
I'm
you
gonna be a
you didn't
cavalier.
say, "Oh, I'm gonna make a paladin." Like,
Right. Right.
like I remember people like, "I rolled a 17, I'm gonna make a paladin." Like, it was, and you had to have rolled that 17 on that charisma, like, and that made the character more rare, which
Right.
is why paladins are studs.
No, exactly. It was like, God, it would be so cool if I could actually become a paladin, or roll up a paladin, because you normally couldn't, because you
And
didn't have this.
well, here's the other thing too is that the older school D&D stuff, especially like I just it was last year, middle of last year, Frog God Games put together a boxed set. So they broke up their rules, which is Swords and Wizardry, into a box set of 4 books, and then through stretch goals they got other books and stuff like that. But they're starting to disseminate those books right now to the backers, and Frog God usually does this cool thing where they put these little sidebars, and it's like, in original D&D, this is how it was done, and now today these are some of the innovations you can put in your game to make them more modern or revert them back to their original format, and it's like you're reading these sidebars and it's almost like a trip down history lane. You're like, that's badass. But like one of the things in the player's book I was reading the other day, it was like the alignments were just lawful, neutral, or
Yes.
chaotic. Not good, not evil, just lawful, neutral, chaotic. And it said in the fighter's description, you got into that sidebar and it said, if during the course of the fighter's campaign you decide as a lawful fighter to become a paladin, if your stats so support it, you can transfer it anytime. And I'm like, oh, that's dope. So like the fighter who becomes a crusader and then becomes chosen by God later, yeah, that's cool as hell. That's some like Paul the Apostle stuff, and you're like, man, that's dope. Because it was the kind of literature they had at the time, and it made for almost like a character arc, an actual whole character arc, not just murder, hobo, take their stuff, right at the table. So there was a lot of that stuff. And to answer your question, Jr., why did they only go to level 10? It's a different scale. The XP is a different scale. The hit points are a different scale. Like for example, White Star, everybody's hit points are rolled with a D6. So like when I first started playing, I'm looking at all of this White Star stuff before I started producing like adventures and modules and stuff, and I was like, man, the most powerful gun in here only does really like 3d6 damage. If you're wearing the battle armor that you can pick up and have a skein field, which is like a force field, I'm like, you're not getting through any of this. And then I looked and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. The hit points are d6 too. So if you get whacked, 2 hits or like 1 or 2 hits can take you out, even if you're like 4th or 5th level. This is not good. You know what I mean?
No.
And suddenly that game became like when I was trying it out with the test group that I normally like test products with. I'm like, oh, let's just have our own game where it's just us doing like bounty hunter stuff. Because what do you call it? Killjoys had just come on TV, and I'm like, yeah, let's just have a Killjoys game once a week where we're not testing out a product, we're just having fun and doing whatever. And man, like I was killing characters because I was the GM. I was killing characters left and right, and I'm like, really sorry guys, but yeah, maybe you want to use cover, and it changed the tone of the game because like they weren't just walking in and being like, we have a warrant for you, you're coming with us. It was, hey, hold on a second, we have a warrant. You know what I mean? Like they were hiding behind stuff, and at one point they were like, "Yeah, we're not going into the saloon." And like you guys remember RoboCop? They had the Ed 209. They went out to like a police department. They bribed a local law enforcement police, and then borrowed their Ed 209 like riot droid to serve the warrant because they didn't want to get shot. And like one of the guys is like a space knight. He's like a star knight, like almost like a Jedi. And it's not like in Star Wars where they can just throw powers left and right how they have it now. It's like you get so many slots per day where you can use these powers, and if you screw it up, because there's a potential you can screw it up. And like one guy tried to like almost like hold person a dude. He's like, yeah, he won't shoot me. Hold person. And he failed the roll. And the guy made his saving throw. And I'm like, yeah, he's not held. And he's got a rifle. Oh, my God. I mean, basically broke down the table. I was like, oh, crap. Stuff got real because it was old school D&D back when it was more miniatures rules than just role-playing. And the reason they only have 10 levels is because instead of for every monster you earn 6,000 points and blah blah blah, it's like if you're a level 2 monster you might get 20 points, 20 XP from that monster. Level 5 monster you might get 150, 200 points, so the advancement is slower. So it's
more meaningful.
Yeah, and it's just a fun game because it's quick and simple. It's one of those games you can use for a pickup game really easy because the characters are really easy to roll up. So I'm kind of looking forward to it, especially because like I haven't done a pirate campaign in space yet. So to have you guys like use a hullbuster ship to break into like a freaking Star Cruise liner or something like that and rob everybody. Oh my God. That'd be amazing.
So I suggested in the side chat, I was suggesting that we just use the OSR rules because everybody's familiar with that and play Forgotten Ruins like it was right before everybody got there. Just a straight fantasy could be fun.
Totes.
But then of course you'd have to do the stats for the gnomes and orcs and whatever.
Well, that's easy, right? Because we run the side channel, which is the lunchtime test drive. So what we're going to do is after we're done doing the White Star sessions, there's a game called Operation White Box, where it's World War II using the D&D rules, and we did a product for it called Special Missions, where we did Modern Army Rangers. So because all the white box rules are compatible, you can do Forgotten Ruin right out of the box.
Well, I was actually thinking just stick with the fantasy before the...
Oh, I gotcha.
Did you have you read the entire book or listened to the entire book, JR?
I'm on chapter 15 because I've read the book, but things came to light afterwards, so I'm going through it again to make sure I understand what you did. And the app that I have to use, because he just gave me a packet of files, and so it keeps skipping around and not playing it in order, so it's a little bit slower. But that's what happens when you can't listen to it in just like the Audible app or one of the published platforms. But I'm really digging. I like the narrator too.
Yeah, he's really fun. There's a section that you get to towards the end of the book where they go into this tomb.
Oh,
and
so good.
And there's these liches that have built this, mighty fortress, and they begin to see their story. and their story takes place like 8,000 years before the Rangers show up. And it turns out that it's the Special Forces Alpha Team who landed in the ruin, ran out of ammo and weapons and everything like that, and basically became mercenaries.
And then
Learning
warlords.
swords and axes. Yeah, and then basically took over most of Northern Europe, and then basically became liches after that.
I'm just giggling because it's like such like you're reading that, and you had heard stuff that The Last of Autumn was talking about earlier about like all these conquerors and stuff like that, and then you start to realize who they are, and you're like, oh my god. And just the implications of that, and it's just that's so good.
Yeah, Jason's already like, well, when you gonna write that story, and like, who's gonna write that story? I'm like, well, we'll just spin it off, and someone will write it, and so so that I think like when people will dig that story, Thor story, but yeah, like I mean, yeah, and we were already talking like because we were working with the miniatures people that will set us up for GE, and the lead designer, right? He's a ranger, right?
I don't know if he's a ranger. He's an infantry officer, I believe.
Oh, okay, but I think he went to ranger school, right? So he's tabbed, and he said that they had a bunch of ranger minifigs. And we were like, oh, we should just do those for Forgotten Ruin with monsters and just like get a game going. That'd be fun.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah, oh my God. Forgotten Ruin's so much fun. Especially if some of the D&D stuff. I've been sending Walt chapters on the latest one. And he spotted a monster the other day, and I was like, that's cool. He spotted it.
So the one the part I like the best, and like I said, I'm on chapter 17 now, is the explanation Thor gives of how he, well, is this a spoiler to say how he got his beard to just stick it to the man?
That's cool.
He converted to a religion and to justify the beard, so he get it past the army. I'm like, dude, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah. And he only wanted the beard because he's like, listen, I'm a ranger sniper. This is as good as it gets for getting chicks, So, he just felt that the operator beard would be the final. And, I don't know if rangers get to grow operator beards now, but back in the day, no, they did not.
Yeah, not in the day. And it's funny, too.
Everything was high and tight.
Now they get nail polish, so it's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're talking a different operational dynamic, right? So when you think Rangers, think fucking like modern day Spartans. These guys are the epitome of discipline, and like they want you to look at them like youthful faced, like what do you call it? Square jaw, perfectly manicured, because that's a semblance of order. With the special forces. They're living with indigenous people who are just like, beard and blah, blah, blah. So they do it because they're more sympathetic to deal with if they look similar.
Yeah. Oh, no. It would look out of place to be high and tight. Yeah. It's like,
yeah. But what do you call it? But the Rangers, back in the day, everything was high and tight. Nowadays, it's more high regular, kind of like the surfer's cut. It's shaved up into about the middle of your ear, and then after that, it gets sort of Elvis on top after that,
And I never understood the complaint about that, because after having lived in a desert for 2 years of my life, like I was glad to shave it all off. I'm like, buzz it to make it all go away. So one last thing to collect dirt,
bugs, whatever.
Yeah, but there's the shave that you get in basic training where you look like a just prison
a Q-tip. Q-tip.
And there's something like you got to remember, the average line soldier is 19 to 21 years old. Hair is his thing, and that's as good as hair is ever gonna get.
It was his thing.
It's all downhill after that.
Yeah.
So like you're literally telling this kid like, we're gonna take your best hair years and you're gonna wear nothing. No, like you'll hang on to any whatever they would let you have, you'll hang on to that much. It just depends on the culture of the unit.
But if there's any one thing getting going into the military, that's the one thing is going to happen to you. You buzz it all up. Yeah.
And
So
the last thing
it.
you want to do is mess with them by showing up with a buzz cut already, just so they can't do that to you. No, you let it grow out just so they have the joy of taking it from you, or they will remember.
Yeah. But it's good that they started letting her grow out your hair, because that's how you used to be able to spot Delta. Because they were the only guys that didn't have to cut their hair.
Yeah, we used to go down Range Road on Bragg, and every once in a while somebody would get a wild hair and they would just stop for a water break right in front of the Delta barracks, or the Delta compound rather. And you'd have that one dude who would slowly drive by the line of troops, the road march troops, and just like he'd just nod his head at you, and as long as you weren't doing something stupid, you were cool. But it's like, once they saw the CO, the old man at the front of with the guide on, they'd be like, oh, all right, yeah, that's fine. But you'd sit down for a water break to huff down like a granola bar or something like that, just for a little energy, so you can move those last 7 miles. And here would come that dude in that old beat up patrol car, and he just nod at you, and you're just like, oh crap. Better not even aim a camera past that, because it was a fence with that like mesh that was woven into it and stuff like that, and you better not even look in that direction on a camera for too long, or somebody would come out and be like, hey, what are you doing?
See, I was
nothing here for you to see.
Yeah.
When I got out, they were like, phones weren't like ubiquitous cameras back then, so it wasn't as big of a deal. You had to have like a dedicated camera.
No. I'm talking like because we used to all carry when I worked with the Scouts, and even before that, we would all carry those like 110 cameras.
Yeah.
Because they fit in your ammo pouch. Right? So if you rolled up on a dude and you're like, oh crap, he's got a whole bunch of intel that you can't carry with you because you're in a wet environment, and once you start beating feet back through said wet environment, that stuff turns into confetti, right? So instead, you would take your 110 and be like, click, 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 and you take all the pictures, and even if you had to ditch the camera, it would come out as like a single cartridge. So like
fair enough.
Yeah, so every once in a while you'd get some little nerd who'd be like, I'm gonna take a picture of why is that guy pointing a gun at me? It's like,
that's always fun. The first time you get a gun pointed at you.
I remember my favorite first gun experience was we got activated. And this is back when military bases were open. You didn't have to pass through a gate to get on.
Right.
And we're sitting there, and we're standing outside because there was going to be something that happened, and we were going to have there was the potential for reporters to come up on the base. And so every barracks had a bunch of us in front with like shotguns and stuff like that. And here comes this lady, short skirt. She's got the heels. She's all done up. She's got her cameraman behind her. We're like, sorry, ma'am. You blah, blah, blah. You can't, can we talk to somebody? Nope, sorry. You're going to have to leave. So then, we watch where she's walking. We get on the walkie-talkie. We're like, hey, she's going around the side of the building. Just make sure she's not going to do something stupid.
Barbie's going around the building. Go check her out.
Yeah, we cut through the building because she was going to try and cut through the chow hall. And, the second she opened the door, I put my shotgun in her face. And man, I swear I swore I smelled urine. But like, I was like, how you doing? Didn't we tell you you're not allowed to be in here? And it's like, look, you cannot come in here. And if you advance one more step, I kind of have to shoot you. Really not like to ruin your makeup. So, but yeah, it was one of that, but that was back in the early 90s. Nowadays you want to get onto a military base, you have to show 3 forms of ID, have a bill with your address on it. They're going to take a DNA sample and an anal swab. It's like, oh my God.
An anal swab.
like in the business I work in, because we have contracts with a Navy base, and if we want to go on the Navy base, there are personnel who, because they, you know, we don't care what you did in your past as long as you show up to work every day and act personal, professional, and polite to our customers. You're a valued employee. You know, and maybe you did something stupid back in the day that got you in trouble, and now you're trying to turn your life around. That's admirable. That's the whole American dream. We love that, right? But
that's rare that people think that.
well, no, I mean, who has it screwed up, right?
Yeah, but if you think about it, you know, security clearances are the same way because
Yep.
you know, you can get a security clearance and be a total shitbag, but as long as you don't lie about it,
Yeah.
that's the key.
So
You know?
so like if you have a like a little hiccup or a speed bump in your past, right? You're on a list with us, and we can't send you to deliver at the Navy base because they won't let you on. You know, and it's not that we're discriminating, right? It's just the fact that, hey, listen, you have a bump in your past for aggravated battery with a weapon. The Navy base isn't going to let you on. Well, you know, it was dismissed after. Yeah, but did you get dismissed in court? Because it's still showing up in your BCI, and they're going to run you. So, you know, so yeah, it's just one of those things. But yeah, back in the day, you could just walk on a military base. You know, these days it's like, pull down your pants. We got this long Q-tip.
All right. So the first time we had it happen to us, I was actually the Kuwaiti police force that pulled us over.
What?
So the convoy had already gone to Navstar. They were waiting for us. We were sent back to get the paperwork the LT stupidly forgot. So we had this bright idea. We were going to stop by the Burger King to get a picture of our gun truck 50 mounted in the drive-thru, right? No problem so far. We pay $5 and get like one half a hamburger or whatever because it was stupid, crazy exchange rate. And we're like all just taking a sliver of this. And then as we're leaving, the gunner decides to throw his bottle up in the air, goes through the turret, catches wind, and then ended up hitting the car behind us. The guy in the car behind us was the general in charge of all Kuwaiti military forces, and his guards were less than pleased. So the next thing we know, we're surrounded, and they've all got their guns on us, and we've got our guns on them, and it was like, shit, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Man, if you were my troop, I would have beaten you inside out. So
maybe that's the real reason I didn't make staff sergeant.
Oh God. Speaking of not making staff sergeant, I have a Galaxy's Edge role playing game to run tomorrow. So I think I need to shut the curtains and kill the lights. How you guys think about this?
All right.
Sounds good.
All right. That was fun just to hang out with you guys.
Oh, I love it. It's like crack on my Friday night. If crack was my thing. So we want to thank everybody in the chat who hung out. Thanks again for C.S. Smith who did subscription, and Michael, I didn't get your email. You were talked over.
Can you type that in the chat real quick, Michael?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you got to do it on Twitch.
Yeah, I don't have a.
All right, what is your email? I'll type it.
Mike at michaelarothman.com.
That's really hard to remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna have
I
to
thought it was
sesame.
going to be something obscene.
Yeah, something extremely mathematical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I got that in the chat for him.
No,
all right, perfect.
He's not going to see it.
Hotforsluts@gmail.
Yeah.
Send your hate mail to Jason on Spock.
Put
Yeah.
JR
Oh,
retype.
Nicole just gave me an audio look. Because I gave away her email. Oh!
All right, we'll get you guys next.